Alice, Sweet Alice, also titled Communion and the Masked Murders, is a 1976 slasher film directed by Alfred. Alice is a bratty child whose sister, Karen, is about to celebrate her first communion. Karen is murdered at the celebration, and people accuse Alice of killing her sister. The film follows Alice, who pleads for her innocence. Guys, welcome back to Garage Slasher-thon, where every day for the month of October, we revisit a slasher movie. Alice, Sweet Alice is a movie I've never seen before, and I decided to watch it for the first time in this marathon. Every year, I try to find these little more niche movies that kind of fit the genre, but I've never seen, and I think most people have never seen. And every so often, I'll find a quick gem. So when I was doing the zombie marathon, I talked about The Serpent in the Rainbow. And that was a really good movie that I feel like goes unnoticed. And in the vampire marathon, there was a few of those as well. And I feel like this is going to be the one for the Slasher-thon, is Communion. It's a very low budget, very minimalistic, subdued slasher movie. But I think it's a really good movie at the end of the day. Just before I get started, upon doing some research for this movie, I found out that the director, Alfred, passed away a little over a year ago. This is his only movie, so it kind of went unnoticed. It wasn't a big news article by any means, but rest in peace, Mr. Soul. The one thing I do like about this movie is it feels very uncanny. It doesn't feel like it takes place in the real world. There's kind of this kind of off feel about the environment of the movie. The director was really inspired by Nicholas Roeg, who directed movies like The Man Who Fell to Earth, Performance, all these very weird, wacky movies. The Witches is probably his most well-known movie. But it does have that kind of Nicholas Roeg uncanniness. It especially feels like Don't Look Now, which was the direct inspiration for this movie. Just little elements of the movie. The characters kind of feel a bit too over the top, not in a way that takes me out of the movie, but one character in specific, he's a pedophile character who kind of lives in the same apartment building as Alice, and he feels like straight up of a Genet movie or a John Waters movie. He's just this very over-the-top, fat, bald pedophile who lives with a bunch of cats. The movie isn't going for subtlety in that sense. I think the movie is more subtle when it comes to its themes. Yeah, it just creates a very unnatural movie, and that kind of adds to the uncanniness. Some very eerie moments in this movie, and the eerie moments, the two biggest eerie moments, are the ones that bookend the movie. The start of the movie, there's this really creepy moment where a character removes a mask, and there's like an older mask underneath, and that kind of foreshadows who the murderer of this slasher film truly is. Then the final scene where Alice is just staring into the camera. That's another very jarring scene. The other thing that kind of adds to the jarringness of the movie is this editing. Every shot just feels like it lingers for a little longer than it should, and it just makes the audience feel a little more uncomfortable. If there's one criticism I do have with the movie, is that it kind of slows down when you know who the killer is, which is a recurring theme with slasher movies. I kind of like it when the slasher is a mystery, kind of like Michael Myers, but instead you kind of have this reveal, and it kind of loses me when the reveal happens. I especially don't like it when the reveal is that it was like a mom all along, or like an old lady, and I'm like, how is an old lady supposed to go on this butchering spree? It always takes me out of the movie when stuff like that happens. But what really makes this movie interesting, though, are its themes. It kind of goes for an anti-Catholic vibe. I was looking into the backstory of this movie, and apparently the director, Alfred, he made a porno back in the year 1972, and because of that, he was excommunicated from the Catholic Church, which is interesting, but because of that, he decided to make this movie, which is kind of targeting the problems he has with the Catholic Church. The main thing he talks about is how the Catholic Church is guilty of using other people as scapegoats for their own problems. Obviously, I'm going to spoil the movie, but the murders are happening because of someone involved in the Catholic Church. But instead of doing that, they kind of just target Alice, who's kind of this innocent little girl. Alice has problems in her life, and instead of addressing those problems, they kind of just throw her in a mental hospital, and they don't seem to deal with those problems. They recognize the problems, but they don't seem to deal with it in an efficient manner. So Alice, in the movie, she's a 13-year-old but in real life, the actress was 19 because they have her do some sexual things. But they really pull it off. The 19-year-old does look like a 13-year-old girl. But anyway, she's going through like puberty, and she's starting to come to terms with her sexuality, and she's beginning to blossom, and no one's really navigating her through this confusing time. She does very disturbing things and very outrageous things. The pedophile who lives downstairs, she goes to his door and starts kind of seducing him, not because she wants to get laid or anything, nothing like that. She just out of curiosity, it seems like it anyway. Again, like instead of addressing those kind of problems, they just kind of just throw her in a mental hospital. She's obviously the killer, let's just get rid of her. Also, she lives in a broken family, and no one seems to address that. Maybe her delinquency, maybe because she's in a broken family, her sister just passed away, she's dealing with this very emotionally turbulent time. No one really addresses that at all. They're just like, oh, throw her in a mental hospital. It's clearly Alice. Even her aunt has some disdain for Alice as a person, which Alice is kind of just a kid, but there's some whole family drama going on, like the mom had her out of wedlock, which made the aunt kind of hate the daughter. And it's all these kind of cool themes that kind of address the problems with the Catholic Church. You can kind of parallel that with the problems they have with child abuse in the Catholic Church, not kind of addressing the problem, just like brushing it under and just trying to get rid of it in the most quick manner as possible so people don't talk about it as much. So that's what I thought was very interesting. And you have some really cool kills in this movie. You have one kill in specific, the one of Alice's sister, Karen. She kind of just gets melted and is kind of like disturbing. And in slasher movies, what usually happens is that the killer sneaks up to a person when they're alone and kills them. And when that happens, it's kind of freaky, but you don't get much of the people's reaction. This murder that happens is like done in front of everyone almost. Like we see like the chaos that ensues from that murder, and it's just everyone in the church is going crazy, and it's just kind of this very disturbing moment. Again, just because the movie feels very uncanny, like it's just like a very eerie watch to me. I really like this movie overall. It's a really fun movie to watch. If you haven't seen this movie, Alice, Sweet Alice, or Communion. Apparently the movie was called Communion when it was released, and I think they retitled it to Alice, Sweet Alice. If I had to assume why, it's maybe because Communion was too offensive to the Catholic Church, which could be the case. There's also another movie called Communion with Christopher Walken, but that came out a few years later. I have no idea why they kept renaming this movie. It has 3 titles. But guys, let me know what you think of Alice, Sweet Alice. It's a great little gem. If you're looking for an underrated horror movie that people don't talk about, I suggest you watch this movie. Stick around, guys. More Garage Slasher-thon tomorrow. I'll see you around.
A story of unnatural love and unnatural death.